Welcome to Final Therapy 11. Remember me? The guy who reviewed the Final Fantasy games, or else he would die? Well, I'm still here. There's been a hurdle since the very beginning of the show, and it was this game. I didn't know Final Fantasy 11 was a massively multiplayer online RPG. Some people that I talked to also didn't even know that, because it's an MMO that is also 20 years old. 20 years old this month, the month of May. Funny enough. And how do you review a massively multiplayer online RPG? This genre is one that takes a piece of you with it, whether you want it to or not. The other question is, how do you even beat it? What constitutes being done for the purposes of a review on YouTube.com? Is there credits in a massively multiplayer online RPG? I spent approximately 169 hours in the world of Vana'diel, the world of Final Fantasy XI Ultimate Collection Seeker's Edition. The genre this game belongs to has the word massively in it, so you're gonna have to bear with me. Most people skip this one. Back in the day, they actually made you buy a PS2 official modem you attach to the back of the console to run this MMO live on a PS2. Kind of impressive, but geez, that's a lot. The game is made for the PS2 in mind. It's actually not that fun to play via a keyboard and mouse. It's made for a controller. Oh, what better way to start than with the setup? A lot of players see it as a sort of barrier of entry. There's a lot of barrier of entries for this game. The big one is the setup. Just starting the game took me, and I logged it, approximately 5 hours over the course of 2 days, which were 2 days, by the way, that my subscription was active and I wasn't playing the game. So frustration number one, we've already started. By the way, this game costs money on its own. I didn't even say that part. Yeah, it's just not the style these days. Any sort of online game, whether it's an MMO or not, it's gonna be free. That's just we figured it out. The companies figured it out. They figured out that they can make as much, if not more money, by giving the game away for free and then letting the player do microtransactions and whatnot. In 2022, buying a game and not being able to play the game at all unless you pay it also a monthly fee, that's messed up. Final Fantasy XI has been updated. It's still alive, in case you were wondering, even with the existence of 14. But they never changed this. The price has never dropped. $30 game base price with a $13 a month fee. Also, the most expensive game I've played on the show. If you're one of those people who equates $1 to an hour, expensive game should be longer, well, you should check out this one. So the setup of Final Fantasy XI requires a Square Enix account. You also need a Play Online account. Have you heard of this? Play Online? It's the name of an engine of a service that Square invented specifically for this game. There's nothing else you can do on it. You need your Square Enix account to sign up on the website. By the way, for a quick laugh, you should probably just check out FinalFantasy11.com. It's hilarious. It looks probably the same as it did back in whenever it started. Your Chrome window is going to be bigger than the website, and it doesn't stretch it or anything. It's just crushed to the side. The buttons are so small. There's all these flashy things on the side. This game is going to make you nostalgic for the early 2000s if you're into that sort of thing. So yeah, that's about 2 or 3 accounts you need, different passwords. They're going to ask you for those passwords. You better write those down. If you don't have them, you might be screwed out of the game. I have to give a huge shout out to some guy on YouTube, Soberdorf, who made a video entitled The Beginner's Guide to Final Fantasy XI on part of his show called Gaining Experience. It's a 48-minute video that I followed second by second to make sure I did everything correctly and followed all his very useful tips. And I think it's like the most popular starter video on YouTube as far as I know. And it has 5,000 views. That's it. That's how many people are like at all remotely interested in starting this game in modern day. He goes through everything you need to know, all the important stuff. If it wasn't for this video, I don't think I would have been able to play, is what I'm going to say. It's not like rocket science, you know, but it's so complicated for what it is, which is the start of playing a game, just a video game. It's one of those websites where you can't press the back button, because if you do, it'll be like, hold up, you wanted to go back? If you go back, like, it messes everything up. You have to follow the exact buttons that they placed. After all that hassle, I was able to get into Play Online. And dude, oh, you gotta look at Play Online. I'm gonna show it here. Think AOL, but more early 2000s. Like, it never updated. It never got modernized. There's no reason to. It exists for this game alone. But it's like a social media service. You could have a friends list. You could have little IM chats. Oh, it's such a rabbit hole of just the 2000s. That was very entertaining, I must admit. But that's not all you need. You also need this third-party service called the Windower. I say need and third-party. You might think, well, it's third-party. Why do you need it? You need it. Prime example, this is a system that lets you play Final Fantasy VII in a window but full screen, which the game doesn't let you do on its own. It also gives you access to a lot of different mods. I wouldn't use the word mod. It's streamlining experience, UI changes, minor convenience and tweaks and enhancements and things to make the game smoother, because the game is as smooth as just like a lot of rocks. I don't know, something that's not smooth. Sharp rocks, not like the nice soft rocks you get at the beach. The biggest thing is like a mini-map, just straight up a mini-map. You don't get that. 20 years they've been updating this game, they never put in a mini-map, but Windower gives you that, so that alone is worth the extra effort, even though it is annoying to figure it all out. But you launch it through Steam, you launch it through Windower, you open Play Online, you go through those menus, you launch Final Fantasy XI, you go in the main menu, you finally get to Final Fantasy XI, the menu, and then you launch that and you get into like another menu, and then that sends you into the game, which is a menu, and then you can create your character and they get dropped into the world. Woo, we made it to the freaking start. How long have we been recording? Jeez, okay. You can choose from a number of different races. There's the Elvan, there's the Human, there's the little squirt Tarus. Hate them. They're always cutesy about everything, and they add Aru to every word. Ooh, you are walking Aru into the other island, Aru? Like, oh, shut up. Like, what kind of person you have to be to play that character and just identify as that? There's also the big, bulky guys. They're like the tanks. The Galka, the big, tough Galka. And the last one is Mithra, the cat girl. Even though this was 2002, they were jumping on the cat girl trend way earlier. And yeah, I think that's like a female exclusive. Like, they are female, the entire race. I don't know how that works. I picked the Elvan. I don't know why. I didn't have a reason. Like, he's kind of boring, but not as boring as a Hume, I guess. I didn't want to be a giant guy. Just want to be kind of a normal guy. So I chose the Elvan. They have slightly different stats, but it doesn't really matter. Okay, so then you get your job. Now this is the good stuff. You can choose from the first jobs that were available in the first Final Fantasy game, if you remember that, from oh so long ago. Now I got a confession to make to everybody. I don't like red mages. Something about them rubs me the wrong way. Like, I want to be overpowered in my department. I mean, choosing a white mage is like, it's like volunteering to be the support forever, and, you know, respect. If you do that, you're the probably most important character on a team, so I respect that. Black mage is like, okay, you want to blow stuff up with your hands just by doing that. That's great. But red mage is like, you can do some of the black mage, some of the white mage, and none of the really cool stuff those guys get at the end game level. So I never want to bother with red mages. All 10 of my games, if I ever had a choice, I never chose red mage. So I chose red mage for Final Fantasy XI. This guy on YouTube, and also everybody online that I asked, red mage is the way to go for soloing this game, apparently. Red Mage was ideal for soloing because it has a balance of being able to fight with a weapon, but also being able to fight with magic. And being able to support it. It is the jack of all trades. I guess that's the appeal. To me, that never does appeal. But dude, I'm not messing around when it comes to a game like this. If somebody tells me it's a good idea to do something, I'm going to do that. I want everything I do to cause a better experience because I know this is going to be a rough time. So you choose your race. Elvan, you choose your job, the Red Mage. Choose your name. Sir Lazanius, the Red Mage Elf. And then you choose your town. You can choose Sandioria, Windhurst, and Bestock. I was told by the guy in the video, Bestock is a decent place to start, and I was just no question about it. Okay, go into the Bestock. Trying to streamline it any way I can. So finally you get dropped into the world of Vana'diel. Oh, the possibilities are endless. Wow, look all around. Look at it. It's a place. It looks like it did in 2002. Looks the same. They never updated the graphics. They never updated anything. But the first town, man, nobody really goes to the first towns anymore. Now, you'll very quickly find out the player base of Final Fantasy XI is very dominantly made up of elite endgame, post-game players. You're wondering where you're going. You're in Bestock. A guy comes up to you and says, "Welcome to Bestock. Make yourself stay." What is the term? And that's it. Welcome, you're there. That's it. Next thing you notice is, wow, nobody tells me a single thing. There's no, and I mean there's no player direction in this game. They don't tell you what's next on a mission. You know, you've played a game that has a quest system, even if it's not an MMO. It lists it out. It says you gotta go here and do a thing, and that'll move on to the next mission. The quests don't do that. Very rarely do they do that. And that's kind of what people like about this game. They base everything off of the social element. You're supposed to walk around town and talk to people. You're not supposed to have everything given to you like a normal game. You need to talk. You need to make friends. You know, in high places, specifically. Or maybe you just need to share information with other noobs and you'll figure each other out. But this is 20 years later. As I said, most of the player base of this game are done with all the stuff that you will be doing as a noob. Most of them might even be unfamiliar with how the new player process goes after all these updates have been introduced to add quality of life. Believe it or not, there is quality of life added. We'll get to that. The game is very empty. There are players walking around. There's a lot of players just standing still, staring at teleport points or whatever, but nobody there is gonna help you unless you go out of your way to ask them. Whoever you ask, you're gonna get the same answer. Hey man, Google it. And that is the biggest disconnect from this original game's inception versus how people play games now. Almost the entire community of just game players, they don't mess with this kind of thing anymore. We're not really that patient, and I think that's because of just, you have so much time to play a game. Are you gonna spend all day trying to figure out what to do next? It took me a couple hours to get to like one of the main guys in Bestock who's gonna be in charge of giving me stuff to do. Turns out it was an old friend, Sid. Now, I didn't expect it, but we have a little bit of a Sid update here. Sid resides, he just so happened to have resided in my hometown and became a main character of my story. If you started in one of the other two areas, you might not have met Sid at all. So I lucked out there. But anyway, yeah, it very quickly occurred to me I was going to be looking at Wikipedia articles for pretty much 100% of my playthrough. It's just not worth it. It's not worth trying. You gotta follow FF Cyclopedia, which is basically the fan wiki. And then there's BG Wiki, which has a full quick start. They call it quick start. And it's like how to level up from 0 to 120. Yeah, it basically describes how to get through the entire game. But man, not all those wiki pages are updated. There's many wiki pages, one for each quest, one for each character, one for each item, one for each monster, one for each map, one for each everything. They're expansive, but yeah, as they're community driven and they're not perfect. One quest guide will tell you to do something, the other quest guide tells you to do something else. Information might be missing. One of the wikis is better at doing certain things than the others. So basically, I'm following 2 wikis at the same time. Thank God I have 2 monitors. Oh man, because one was the game and one was just tabs and tabs and tabs and tabs of wikis. Just endlessly looking through, making sure I'm going as efficiently as possible. This game turns you into a machine of trying to do things fast because everything is tediously slow. Ridiculously, mind-numbingly slow. Those are the basics. Those are the basics of the game I just described, starting out, what this game is going to entail, what this video is probably going to be like. This experience, me telling you what happened, what Final Fantasy XI. Maybe you know nothing about Final Fantasy XI, which most people don't these days. Well, buckle up. Have you ever thought maybe one day I'll try it? By now, you might be turned off already, and the rest of the video is going to be me explaining why that's a good thing. I'm going to call this next section gameplay. We're in the gameplay section where I vent my frustrations on this gameplay, okay? As I stated earlier, the social aspect is gone. This is an MMO that you're meant to make friends, you're meant to have a whole big party. You can't really do anything on your own. So, as the game evolved over time, they added in a system called trusts. The trust system is a way of kind of like summoning, but it's not limited to a job. Any player can do it. You summon a computer character to play with you, basically. Anytime you go out, free to use, doesn't cost magic or anything. This is basically the game's way of saying, here's how you play it alone. It's possible now with that update, whenever that happened. And most of this game is possible to solo. It's just gonna be, depressing, lonely, and boring, and frustrating. That's all. I mean, it's possible. The maps, especially the few early maps, they're just so empty. Until you get to, like, one of the big cities in the middle where a lot of cross paths happened early and late game. You're gonna find some people there. No one is going to be exploring the dungeons that you're exploring. You're not gonna have those great online gaming moments where you just meet someone and you're on the same page with them and you don't even know their name, but like you go on some quest and you have some kind of bond. That can happen in these online games. I think that's where the magic happens. Very, very rare in a game like this. It's kind of dead out there. Let me at least explain how gameplay works. Aside from quests going, like, let's talk about combat. You go out to the world, you're a red mage, and there's enemies there, and there's no random encounters. And you go up to an enemy, you click on him, and your guy goes up to him, starts swinging a sword. It's an auto battle system. Isn't that interesting? First of the series. Now, I already have a hot take on auto battle systems. I've only really experienced it in Xenoblade Chronicles. I wasn't that much of a fan. I don't really get auto battle systems because it just plays itself, doesn't it? I mean, I know it's more complicated than that. In a game like Xenoblade Chronicles, you need to move your guy around a little bit and you need to choose a special attack. But then you're just like waiting for those special attacks to reload. I found a lot of the gameplay in that game to be a little on the boring side. Not terribly boring, but not my preferred gameplay style, we'll say that. Final Fantasy XI is like that, but just, you go to an auto battle system, all the trusts are your whatever level you are, and they know what they're doing. They're programmed to do their job. If they're a tank, they're going to take the hits and provoke the enemy. Their mages are going to stand back, they're going to heal, all that stuff. They're going to do their jobs maybe better than a human new player would. And what that means is you, the player, need to contribute nothing. You can watch your guy do the automatic swing attack thing. Most of the time, and I'm talking to the bitter end, I did like no damage to these enemies with my sword. Every time you swing a sword, your like sword stat goes up a little bit, and I've maxed that out because obviously I just let him sit there and swing the whole game. But maxed out stats, no matter the enemy, I'd be missing, and when I hit 10 damage or something ridiculously low like that. But I'm a mage, so I should be using my mage abilities, I thought. I got that blizzard, got that fire, got that thunder. Using my abilities on the enemy, and they miss or they do nothing. It was right out the gate. Just doing that is just such a bad omen for how this game is going to go. You think, okay, I'm a noob. I'm level 1. Maybe I'm not doing anything yet. That's fine. Didn't make a difference later in the game. I don't know what it was. My character, Lasanius, useless guy, absolutely carried by his trusts. And I know part of that might be me being bad, but you can't blame me because that's how the game's structured now. This game is not the same game it was when it came out. This game is patched together like a Frankenstein in order to allow players to experience it in some way, even if it wasn't the intended way. You're not meant to follow a wiki with trusts and just blaze through the game as fast as you can. Fast, I say. But that's the only way to experience it these days, because it's just by the nature of it and the lack of players and the way games work in 2022. So the battle system is like non-existent because of that. You know how in a game, in a Final Fantasy game, you're commanding all of your party. You choose this guy to do this thing, this guy to do that thing, and while he's doing that, you can do that. You can heal him or you can buff him, and you know how JRPGs work. So I guess the idea was you're doing all those things, but with real people. You're telling him, hey, I need healing. Hey, can you do this? Oh, I'm about to do a strong attack. If you buff me, that would be great. Oh, can you do that? Boom. Oh. And I could see that being really cool, like communicating with party members who are human, but that's not what you do anymore. That's non-existent. They replaced all the humans who left with non-humans who you can't talk to, and you don't need to because they do their job. And that means that every battle is just a waiting game of watching that health bar slowly go down. That guy has a special attack. Are you going to use it, computer? They like rarely use their special attacks. It's very frustrating because they can wipe out enemies with those, but they just don't do it. It's so dull. It's so like sad. This game made me sad. You're supposed to live in this world. You're supposed to exist. The idea was you're supposed to just be. You're supposed to be there. Be in this world. Be fully immersed. And just live there and hang out with people and meet people. Talk to people. Talk to NPCs. Learn about the world. Live and breathe in it. And then one day, you talk to the guy who tells you something interesting. And that guy sends you on an actual mainline story quest. And you go and do it. And your knowledge of the world assists you on your way. And you start to figure out how to do things more. Like in real life, you just, as a person, you just learn as you live. And eventually you get through main milestone quests. It's like Second Life. It's an MMO. By nature, they're simulators. They're not games you're meant to just turn on, play, and beat, and then go away. And that is how I treated this game as a game, because that's what I like to do, is play video games. I don't like living in a world. That doesn't appeal to me. Unless my friends are there. I know my friends are on Final Fantasy 11. You know, I was asked, actually. I had a friend who asked, how far are you in Final Fantasy 11? I was level 50 at the time. And he was like, oh, wow. Yeah, wow. That was in like 2.5 weeks. He's like, geez, whoa, you made progress. I was going to think about joining you, but I guess I can't. And I was like, oh, that's a shame. But what I meant to say was, you're my friend and I don't wish this pain upon you. The idea of bringing somebody in after I had knowledge of how miserable this experience was, I mean, maybe a friend would have made it better, but not that much better. 2 people? That's not enough to get through. You need multiple people. So I guess we'd be sharing the pain. Maybe that would have been more fun, but I don't know. I feel like this was a quest that if I really wanted to see how it is in 2022, I was just gonna go in alone. And I've never felt so alone in a game before. I only play single player games, but it's something about playing a multiplayer game. Massively multiplayer. Just no one's there. No one's there to help. I did get a link shell invite. Link shells are like the communities, sub-communities. Like there's a leader of this link shell. You pass it to somebody and they're part of the link shell and you can communicate within like a server. They also have a Discord server that I was invited to. And I should say this, people on Final Fantasy 11 are ridiculously nice. I've never met somebody who was angry or, well, I asked a few questions on the 11 subreddit, and there were a couple. Yeah, I mean, that's Reddit. But the people, like, I just went on and said, anybody have a link shell? I guess I'm supposed to join a community. Is that how this works? And this guy came, gave me a link shell. He gave me some money to buy maps because, yeah, you don't have any maps. You need to find the vendor and buy an individual map if you want to even kind of know where you're going. And of course, there's no mini-map without those mods that I'm talking about. He gave me money for maps. He didn't know who I was. He just said, welcome to the game. Welcome to this world. Good luck. It's a tough time. Here's some money. It's like, okay, thanks, man. Really nice community, but everybody in that server was level 99. They were talking every day about doing the new raid, doing these quests to get the big crazy armor that takes months to get. I just couldn't be with them. I was shunning myself from them. These guys are so advanced, I don't want to bother them with my petty noob things. Part of it was me making myself more alone. So yeah, another way that this game is completely different than it was in 2002 is the addition of telepoints. I say the addition of telepoints. They added those in way later. There's no quick travel in the original version of the game. Because once again, you're just supposed to walk. If you're not waiting and watching the same animation until an enemy dies, you are walking and walking and walking across maps. Empty maps of enemies who might attack you and stop you. They might be ridiculously stronger than you, like 30 levels above. You have no chance of killing them, and they'll aggro you and kill you in like 2 hits. Or super weak, so much lower than you that you won't get XP for killing them, but they'll still aggro you. Why do you program enemies to aggro you at such a low level like that? Waste your time, waste your time, waste your time. And that is the key phrase. Some people might interpret spending a lot of time as like stopping to smell the roses and enjoying the world like it was intended to just be in the world and exist there and figure it out as you go. But I personally could not get past the fact that this is a game that you pay for more time to play. Every opportunity this game has to make things harder for you, aside from the quality of life updates, it's to waste your time. Everything is meant to waste your time. Everything takes so long, way long. And that's a problem with RPGs in general, but this is nothing compared to like playing Final Fantasy VII on the PS1. It's not that. It's like intentional stabs to your gut. Like, you thought you were gonna do this? You literally have to wait 24 hours. For no reason, you just have to wait 24 hours. And it's like, that's another day lost, I guess. I couldn't look away from the fact that this game profits off of you paying it monthly. Like, gee, I wonder why I can't just do this immediately like any other game in the series would let me do. Because this is a monthly service game. There's a feature that you can't access until your account has existed for 45 days, as in just long enough for that free trial to expire for you to pay for another month. Like, there's so much of that. Just why would you do this to yourself? What joy do you really get out of just spending that money? This game felt like having a job that sucks and is really tedious, but instead of getting paid, you pay them. It's just, and also the job doesn't have any coworkers. It's just you're like locked in your own room and just staring at the ceiling all day, waiting for a thing. Wow, I'm just kind of describing my actual job. It's as if every good decision, every quality of life improvement that they made to this game was made at the point where they couldn't afford not to make it anymore. Now, the game is mostly alive due to the old players, the elite, the veterans, but the new players are a thing too. They're a source of income. And when they start the game and the first town's empty and they can't find a human person to play the game with, they can't play the game in that case. So then they add trusts. Then all of a sudden it's easy. Then they add telepoints, because that's just a standard we live by in the gaming industry to this day. If you're gonna have a game as big as this and not have quick travel of some sort, you're insane. I don't care what your design philosophy was. They add easier ways of boosting XP. They add ways to actually grind at a decent pace to get leveled up, to experience the story, because they know that the veteran players already went through that, and the new players are gonna be upset if it takes so long to do things, especially when they're coming off of something like 14. So yes, a lot of aspects of playing the game today is way better than it was back in the day in 2002, but I'm not gonna hold back my complaints because it's still a a misery, an absolute misery. One of the first moments the lonely, depressing atmosphere of this game really settled in was when I went on a quest to sail a boat on the other side, to the other side of some island to a new area. I imagine this moment was huge back in 2002 when there was no quick travel or anything like that. The quest was to discover the next island over and do some recon mission for your nation. You gotta get a boarding pass, you go onto the dock, and you sit there until the ship comes at like 4 interval points throughout the day. You just sit there and do nothing. And I imagine this would be a good opportunity to see other people waiting online with you, to share stories, discuss what are you up to, make some friends. And then the ship comes and you get on the ship. You have to sail at sea. You really just sit there on the boat for like 15 minutes as it sails on an ocean to another spot on the map. It's kind of cool. But I imagine that's just where all the magic happens, you know? The ship is full to the brimming. Maybe some people had to get shown away because there's too many spots already filled. Everybody's talking. There's like music playing, I imagine. People are fishing. People are sharing stories. People are running into other people doing the same quest they're on and joining and making friends and everything. And in my experience, the dock was empty. I got on the ship. The ship was empty. Alone by myself for 15 minutes. Just sitting there on the boat. All I could see was like a relic of the past 2 decades lost. All the stories that this ship may have seen. And I'm not a part of any of that because I'm playing this game 20 years later. That's when things started getting existential on my trip. You know, this game is filled with a lot of nothing like that, like sitting on a ship doing literally nothing. I had a lot of time just to think about stuff, think about where I am, where I'm going, both within the game and like in real life. It was strange. You even get access to an airship. I didn't even bother going on the airship. By the time I gained that, there was no reason to use it because I had these little jewels that I could just doop, and I would teleport to an area way faster than an airship. And in the way they added quality of life, some of that magic is lost. But would I rather play back in the day? Probably not, because everything was way harder. So I don't know. There's just no way. There's no perfect way to experience this game is what I'm thinking here. Let's talk a little bit about a very popular topic that I bring up almost every episode of the show. Freedom versus story. This has been a long narrative stretching throughout these videos of me kind of coming to terms with what it means to have a customizable character versus an in-depth story. And wow, Final Fantasy X and 11 could not be further apart. The absolute linear, no customizability, except for the little orb tree thing. And then in 11, you can choose a totally different race. You can choose your job, you can choose everything. And of course, if you've been following along, what that means is your character is hardly a character. Technically, you're the main character. You're the guy they scraped off the streets of Bestock in my case. And you found yourself fumbling into this crazy adventure. It's not that crazy compared to what I've played so far. It's really, the story is not that crazy. And that's because there's no really narrative anchor. There's no main character. I'm sorry, I'm not gonna pretend like Lasanius is this great guy. First of all, he looks like an absolute idiot. I couldn't get good armor for until the very end of the game. He looks like a moron. He doesn't speak, of course. Why would he speak? He's a customizable character. Although, I don't see why they couldn't have the main character speak because there's no voice acting and very little cinematography in this game. Of the 5 different races, they just swap out the cutscenes with whatever your in-game model is. And the options, you can choose options when people ask you questions like yes and no, but it doesn't affect anything. Your character just does and then the other character goes what do you mean? And then your options are be clear about it or don't be clear about it. And if you choose don't be clear about it, the other character just says, could you be more clear about it? Hey, what's up with that? Why isn't there voice acting? Is that a dumb question? I know it's an MMO. There's very little real deal cutscenes, at least in the base game. Is there any reason why we couldn't have voice acting? That adds such a in-depth layer if you want to connect to these characters. That's why I connected so much more closely with the 10 characters than the others. I don't know, man. This has less story content than 10. We're not talking about story yet. We're talking about freedom versus story. Because you're all customizable, you can go to Bestock or Windhurst or Sandioria and get slightly different stories. Like, they have to account for all this stuff. The story ends up being not that special, not very focused. I think I can definitively say I don't prefer that over something like 10. Especially when a game is this damn tedious to get through. Usually the payoff to a lacking story is like, oh, well, the gameplay is like really in-depth and cool and you can just dig your fingers into it. No, the goddamn game plays itself. So what am I gaining out of this? It took many hours to get to the point where I was actually getting like semi-regular cutscenes. Because usually it's just like you report to Sid from where I'm from. Sid tells you to do a thing and you do the thing and nothing... There's no story happening, you're just doing your duties in Bestock. There's nothing significant. And then you take this boat to this new area, and a guy says, oh, are you Lasanius? Yeah, your name has been spreading around here. This guy's looking for you. You know this guy? I'm like, I don't know that guy. And it's like, oh my gosh, something's happening. And this guy with an eye patch meets up with you, and you're like, you're Lasanius. Boy, do I have a mission for you. And it's like, oh, the story is starting. All right, listen up. Are you listening? You're the one chosen. From what I heard, you're the only one who could be up to the task for this. I need you. And I'm like, yeah. What do you need me to do? I need you to get me 3 clumps of beeswax from the local bee enemies over there. And that's when it really set in, like, this whole game's gonna be nothing, isn't it? Till the bitter end, aside from a handful of dungeon crawling quests, most of the quests were that. Get me this item. Could be an easy item, you just have to grind through some enemies. Could be a ridiculously hard item that is guarded by enemies way stronger than you that you can't get to. Gotta figure that out, I guess. One of the reasons why they suggest you play Red Mage is that Red Mage gets access to the sneak spell, which kind of coats you or makes you lack sound when you step, because some enemies can hear you and they'll aggro you. Some enemies can see you, and there's a spell called Invisible. It'll make you invisible and you can walk past them. So it's like doing a solo run without those abilities, you're just like having such a harder time than everyone else. It's insane. And most of the quests really need you to just run through people, get an item, come back. That's like the game. And can we talk about like the text box? This game is like part text adventure because there's this just window taking up a solid 1/4 of the screen at all times. And there's a line for every action that occurs. Any move that your party members make, or that you make, or that the enemy makes, it all goes right there. And man, it just flies by. You know how I said I don't do any damage with my sword or with my magic spells? I couldn't figure that out for the longest time because there's no way to tell which attack is mine. I'll play it right now. You'll see how the dialogue box moves during a battle. I'll use an ability and I'll keep my eyes peeled to that text box to go like, I really gotta see how much damage I did. And it's just like, it all flies by in a blink. Why do I need to know all this information? I don't care how much my party member did in terms of damage. It's all good, man. I see a health bar, that's it. If you're in a link shell with a chat member, with many people chatting all at once, that'll appear while you're fighting. Or in the middle of a cutscene, something dramatic will be going on and somebody will be like, I don't know what we're gonna do next. And then like some random guy in your chat is saying, haha, yeah, Lamau. He'll just say something like dumb and it'll take you right out of the cutscene that you were watching. Speaking of moving fast, what doesn't move fast is getting into a battle. Oh, this was insanely frustrating. So your trusts, they won't attack somebody unless you attack it. So as a red mage, you're kind of a support class. You're not going to be on the front lines, but as a solo player, you need to take a stab at the enemy or the trusts won't fight it. So this is especially a pain when you're not trying to fight enemies and an enemy aggroes you and it chases after you. By the way, they're relentless. If you think you can just run, you can't. Unless you change maps, enemies in this game will not stop chasing you at any moment. If they aggro you, they want you dead, and the only way to get through it is to kill them. If they're stronger than you and you can't even damage them, you will die. That's it. So to fight an enemy that's aggroing you, or any enemy at all, you need to click on it, and then you need to wait for your guy to unsheath the sword, walk up to the guy, and then he sits there. Oh, he just sits there for I don't know how long. It feels like forever, but he just goes like, and then the battle starts. It might not sound like that big a deal to you, but it gets insanely frustrating. When you get aggroed, they'll hit you like 2 times, which could be like half your health. And they'll be like, oh my god, I'm being attacked, I'm gonna die, I'm gonna lose everything, I'm gonna lose all this progress, I need to engage this battle so maybe my trusts can kill this guy. Fight him. Fight him. He hits me again. One more hit and I'm dead. Fight him. I've died because my guy just won't unsheath the sword and swing it fast enough. It's ungodly frustrating. Yeah, I mean, I know MMOs take a long time to do things, but when the combat is just misery, there's not much you can do to save the game. It's gonna be terrible. And it was terrible. There's this one quest. I could have a million examples of quests that went wrong and took days or hours to do because some stupid thing that I couldn't figure out, or the wikis couldn't even help me. One quest where I had to farm 3 crumbs of mold. Yeah, if you notice a pattern, that's like you just gotta get 3 random pieces of crap on the ground. Find 3 mold crumbs in this cave with enemies that'll kill you in like 5 hits. I go in there, the wiki says here is the exact pinpoint area that those 3 crumbs are. Go to this point on the map, go here, here's like detailed instructions on how to get to each point. I follow it all, and the 3rd one is not there. It's just not there. And this, I'm telling you, took like 2 days of continuously coming back. I'm wondering if there's a glitch. I contacted support, and then one day I ran into some guy, an actual player in this cave, which is like a first, and he was like level 80 something, and I was like, dude, do you know about this quest, man? This thing's not showing up. And he goes like, yeah, let me just go and get that for you. Maybe I can bring it back. You stay right here. And he goes and he gets it. And he goes like, there you go. Open your trade window. It's like, this is the first time I've ever even dealt with like a party member or trading or anything. And I was just trying to figure it out, going through the menus. And he's like, did you get it yet? Yeah, just go ahead and take that from the trade menu. I'm like, yeah. Trying to figure it out. Yeah, I'm not really seeing it. I think my inventory's full. I gotta drop some of this. Oh god, you only get 30 slots in your inventory. That sucks, by the way. And I went through my inventory and found out that, so these crumbs were actually key items that went to a separate spot, but I saw in my inventory I had a mold crumb that wasn't the exact same name as the one I needed for the quest. It's like an exo-ray mold crumb, but the one I had was like a clump of mold. Distinctly 2 different things, but they were both mold. And I found out that you can just get this item not by going to those pinpoint slots. You can actually just get them off of enemies that'll drop them, but they're named different, but they still count. And if the game detects that you have one of them in your inventory, it will despawn the key item that's on the ground. And I realized this all at that moment, while this guy was just like, I have it for you. Why can't you take it? And I thought I was confused with the menus, but I wasn't. I actually just literally could not take it because the game wouldn't let me, because I already technically had a thing that was somewhat related to that apparently could be used in place of the key item. If you followed that, then hopefully you understand how frustrating that was, but it's hard to explain. And that took like 2 days before I got to that point and I could continue with the story again, because the fate of the universe relied on 3 mold crumbs in the cave over there. This guy took the time to tell me, by the way, I was like level 50 something. And he was like, you don't have a sub job. And I heard about this sub job thing. You could have a sub job where you take a new job and it is like half the power. You can only get like half the level of your main job. So I was level 50. I could have had a sub job that was level 25 at that point. And he was like, You should do that, man. Hey, I know a lot of red mages, they go for the black mage so they can go for that power. Some people tell you white mage, but in my opinion, black mage is a lot better. La, la, la. He goes off on this whole thing. And I'm like, yeah, that's nice. Oh, I'll look into that, man. Yeah, bro, I'll look into that. Thanks, man. Sorry about this whole confusion thing, blah, blah, blah. The entire course of my game, I never got a sub job. Because you have to go to your house, change into a different job, the one that you want to level up, and abandon your old job while you level up this current one. And I said, oh, no, I'm not doing that, because that sucks. If I'm going to grind level-wise, I'm going to gain levels, why would I not do it in the main job that I'm using? The sub job allows me to access some abilities that that job may have. So my complaint earlier about the red mage not accessing black mage abilities, that guy was right. I would be able to use black mage abilities. But let's say I leveled up to the cap, which is 99. I would only be able to use spells that a level 50 black mage would be able to use anyway, and I would spend a ton of time grinding the black mage to 50 while my red mage just sat there. While I could spend that time grinding the red mage to maybe get to max level or something and get really strong. So I never had a reason to use a sub job, even though these epic veterans of the game were like, you need a sub job, it's important. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's actually not. For my purposes, to go through the story, no, it's not, because the trusts do all the work anyway, don't they? Because the game plays itself. It doesn't matter what I do. I just gotta deal with all the crap like finding 3 mold crumbs in a cave. And while we're on the topic of levels, you heard of limit breaks? Yeah, you know limit breaks from Final Fantasy VII. The supercharge attack that lets you do, after getting damaged or something, you can do a big Omni Slash or something. Carried over into Final Fantasy VIII, and it evolved into something different with 9 and 10. Final Fantasy XI has limit breaks. It's not even a move, it's not something like that at all. There are limit break quests that you obtain, and you complete these quests to break the limit, aka the level cap. Breaking the level cap is tied to limit break quests. I just love that they're called limit breaks, because when you hear that term, you think like, oh, cool, this is going to be something cool. Final Fantasy has a history of making limit breaks something cool, but it's the least cool thing possible. It is a chore that you have to do in order to level up your character. The original level cap was 50, and by the end it kept leveling up, 70, 75, eventually 99, but not really 99, we'll talk about that later. The thing with limit breaks is they're terribly annoying, and I say there as in there are many of them. Once you hit 50, you need to undergo a limit break quest to be able to level up to 55. Every 5 levels, whatever you're doing within the story, within the game, whatever quest, you need to stop like a brick wall in your way and go to some guy in a town to gain another quest, and forget about everything you were doing and go do this really long, annoying quest. Report back, then you can level up. This was, ironically, almost my breaking point. And no, in case you're wondering, you can't just bulk all the limit break quests at once and do them all in a row so that you don't have to worry about it again. You can only do it if you're close enough to that limit break. So you get the one that allows you to go to 55. You can't get the one that allows you to go to 60 until you're a couple levels ahead. So you can't just steamroll them. You have to continue the story for like 2 more hours and then stop again. I've seen like one cutscene in 2 hours. Well, I gotta stop for a couple more days to figure out how to do this incredibly grinding, stupid quest just to be allowed to level up so I can face the enemies that are coming up in the story. Why? And these quests, the early ones, they have you going into deep dungeons with enemies 30 levels above you. Like I said before, there's lots of quests like that. You have to swoop in, be stealthy, and snatch items. They obviously can't expect you to fight the enemies because you are not able to, because you're not at that level cap yet. So they intentionally put kill and what hit enemies that take 2 hours to get to. but you can't fight them. You need to be invisible, but you can't pick up items when you're invisible, so you need to decloak by using an item or something. Hope they don't see you, grab the item, then they'll probably see you, murder you in one hit, but it's okay because you got the item. That's what limit break quests mostly were in the beginning. A lot of them at times did require you to work with people, but they added in key items to change that up. Like there's a place where you have to sit on 2 buttons at the same time, so you need to get a person. But then they added an item that's just like a pouch of weighted stones. So you can just put that on the button and then put your character on the other and you're good. So limit break quests, they test your limit, needless to say. First 2.5 weeks of the game, I got to like level 50. Another 2.5 weeks after that, I was like level 60. Just, it cuts your efficiency so hard. It's painful. Most of that time I spent not seeing any story, getting disconnected from the characters, just... That's when it all started crashing down. Why don't we talk about story? That's all what you can expect. The moment to moment of playing this game, it's walking, watching computer people kill the enemy, doing something very wrong, going to 2 different wiki sites with multiple pages to figure out what went wrong, figuring it out eventually, moving on and repeat. But what about in between all that? What about the story? Let's talk about that. A normal Final Fantasy game, 30, 40 hours. There's a lot you can do in that time, but if an MMO is going to be like triple that, does the story live up to that? The answer is no. In fact, pretty certain there's just straight up less story in this game than the last one. Or the one before that, or the one before that, or the one before that, or the one before that. Maybe it has more story than the NES games. I don't think it has more story than the Super Nintendo games. At least not as interesting. Why don't we do some pure calculation? Let's look up cutscenes. Final Fantasy X. So that game took me 40 hours to beat. This top YouTube upload, 11 hours and 16 minutes. That is a fourth of the game dedicated straight directly to story, not counting anything else. Let's check out Final Fantasy XI cutscenes. 2 hours. In the base game, in 2002, there's 2 hours worth of main game story. That's it. Cutscenes featuring characters who are not very memorable. Characters who don't connect with you, who don't spend the journey with you because you're alone, of course. Maybe the story wasn't as important as the friends we made along the way. And I'm not saying that ironically, maybe that was literally the intention. Maybe people have such fond memories of Final Fantasy XI because of the friends, because of their own stories, their own happenings that happened to just them and maybe not anybody else, the weird instances, the weird people they might have run into that they didn't know. None of that exists anymore. The story on its own is all we have now as somebody playing through this alone, and it is nothing interesting at all. As the DLC went on, things of course got harder and harder and harder. End game level equipment and abilities and metagame stuff all gets thrown out the window. This is such the nature of an MMO. It's the nature of mobile games too. If all your players get the best cards in a card-based gacha mobile game or something, what do? They add another tier of even stronger than that because otherwise they wouldn't be paying for stuff, you know? It's the same idea. So anything that was overpowered in base game is pathetic by later years down the line. By today's standards, nothing you earn from the story matters at all, aside from access to areas and stuff like that. We'll go through the DLCs quickly at some point, but we should mention the Rhapsodies of Vana'diel. This was the last DLC that they made in 2015, that was not that long ago. With this update was a lot of quality of life stuff. Doing Rhapsodies of Vana'diel quests, even though it's the end of the story, many of the missions in that DLC award the player with key items that permanently boost their character. And I'm talking about multiple items that give you 30% increase in EXP permanently. But that's why I'm talking about Rhapsodies of Vana'diel, because you have to experience that story if you're playing through this game efficiently, you're not going to just save that to the end, because you can do a lot of it early and you will get permanent boosts, and you need to do that. Any guide you find online will tell you to do Rhapsodies of Vana'diel quests immediately, as soon as you possibly can. So that was something I experienced a lot of, that story. That story and a lot of stories just kind of happen in happenstance, because when they were added to the game, they didn't often program natural ways for these stories to occur. So you will enter a town, and I mean, the first time I saw Rhapsodies of Vana'diel cutscene, I just walked into my hometown and I got a cutscene of a girl in a cave of crystals teleporting into it and going like, where is he? Where is he? I need to find him. And then it cut back to me in the town, and I was like, I mean, this is before I really researched DLC or anything. I had no idea what that was. That actually happens a lot in this game too. You'll be very confused about the story. Many times. Because of the way these DLCs are added, and because the game, I don't think you can buy the game alone. I got the Ultimate Collection Seekers Edition. I think that's the only version of the game you can actually play these days. So you'll get all the DLC no matter what, it's all integrated. But what that means is, you're gonna be juggling 5 or more stories at the same time. And unless you're really closely following a guide, you're not gonna know what story cutscenes for which. Some quests will say, go to this town, and you'll get a cutscene for the next part of the story. But you'll go to the town, and you'll get a cutscene for a different DLC. And you'll see that and be like, what? Who the heck is this? Why is he talking to me like I know him or something? These stories just mashed together. If you're familiar with Final Fantasy XIV, I believe those stories are in linear order. I mean, I've played it, so I don't know, but pretty sure you have to beat the main story and then it continues in a line. What I was not excited to learn was the DLCs of Final Fantasy XI are all kind of separate stories, most of them. So that means you can experience them all at different intervals, and these guides will tell you to do exactly that. It is more efficient and it's a good idea, but man, in terms of understanding what's going on in the story, really rough when you're seeing 5 different things, and it's not like 5 different things once a day. You know, you'll see a cutscene for a DLC 2 weeks ago, and then the guide will tell you, okay, now it's time to go back to that. And you'll be like, okay, what was happening? In terms of connecting to the characters, which I believe is like one of the most important things you do in a video game story, it does not happen in this game whatsoever. And it's not even just because of the scattered plot lines, but it's because of you as a character are a non-character. And the people you meet along the way rarely appear in their own stories, never mind while you're waiting for them to appear while looking at all the other stories. It's such a mess of unengaging gameplay and boring story. And apparently, without all the quality of life, according to people online, it took them 6 months to get through that. 6 months for a 2-hour story. Literally, movies are longer. And now my plan was, like, I obviously couldn't do all of the DLC for this video. That would just be insane. I heard from people online that would take approximately 500 hours to complete every single DLC and see all the story. 500 hours. Is it fulfilling to do this game with DLC? I don't think so. I don't think so. The worst part is that you go to like the hardcore fans' opinions on the story of this game, and they go like, "Oh yeah, the base game? Oh, that's nothing. That's like that barely even counts as a prologue." It's like, bro, it took me 50 hours. It took me a month of my life, and I've not scratched the surface. The only way I'll truly experience the story is to see all the DLC. The main story doesn't count. According to hardcore fans, the main story is non-important to anything. You just have to do it. It's just the thing you have to do. It's a grind. I'm starting to think the whole game is a grind. Think about how insane that is. Like, think about a game you consider a masterpiece. Long-running games that are famous for getting 10 out of 10s, like Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time, The Last of Us, any game like more on point, Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy X, any Final Fantasy, Chrono Trigger. Imagine people who tell you, oh, this game it's amazing. This changed gaming. It affected me so much. Oh, you have to experience it. Oh, what do I have to do? Is it just like how long is it? Like a 20-hour game? It's like, yeah, but it requires like 100 hours of literally nothing. of walking and just watching your screen for like 100 hours, and then you can play Final Fantasy VII. Like that's essentially what they're telling you. The game doesn't get good till 100 hours in. What mindset do you have to be to think like, oh, that's reasonable? And then they're telling me, yeah, I mean, 11 is like the best story. I mean, it's like one of the best stories in gaming. It'll cost you 100 hours. It's like that movie where they have the time on their wrist and they have to like spend time as currency, and eventually they just die because they spent all their time. I felt like this sucks. I'm paying a monthly fee to do this, but I'm also paying with my life because I'm losing hours to something I'm gaining nothing from. And when I look online, the only thing I see is people saying, you're not spending enough. Even just experiencing a DLC or the main story or anything, the cutscenes are so few and far between nothing that you can't get connected to the characters because he's busy walking around and fighting enemies and hunting down 3 mold crumbs in a cave again. Imagine watching a TV show. It's not even watching an episode a week. It's watching one scene and then waiting a couple days and watching the next scene. Imagine watching a TV show like that. That's what it's like playing the story and trying to get invested in the characters of Final Fantasy XI. Like I said, maybe you weren't meant to get so attached to the characters. You were meant to get attached to the friends you made along the way, unless you forced your friends into it, which I wasn't going to do. There's nobody here. It's just you in an empty world. The people, the veterans, who have played this game for decades. The thing is, they don't actually know what it's like to play Final Fantasy XI anymore. They've been invested in the post-game for so long. Maybe even before like telepoints were introduced. Guess what, man? You don't know what it's like to experience the story in 2022. You played a different game. I didn't even describe what the story was. I didn't even talk about what the story is. You do pointless missions in your town. You talk to Sid, whatever. You talk to this girl named Lion, whose hair looks like a lion's mane. I think she has like a tail. You go on her and do a couple quests, and you eventually run into like weird shadowy things, and you're like, the shadowy things shouldn't be here. Or she tells you that, and your response is like, because that's what your character does. And then you find out, okay, these are bad signs, and then you later confirm, okay, these shadowy creatures means that the Shadow Lord is back. Yo, the Shadow Lord? The Shadow Lord's back? And you're like, oh, the Shadow Lord's back. You go to Sid, you go to the eye patch guy, Shadow Lord is back, and we gotta stop him. And then your final mission is to go to the castle to stop the Shadow Lord. That's it. Stop the Shadow Lord. The story is literally kill bad guy. That's what you do. So I entered that final dungeon around the ending of my first month with this game. Final dungeon. Suffered a lot on the way, but we're here. Let's go. I run into a party of two human players in the final dungeon. I don't think there's a reason to go back to the final dungeon unless you're doing like this mission in terms of post-game. And they were there doing the same mission that I was doing. Right at the end, I was like, people, real people on my level. Hey, want to fight the final boss together? And they invited me to the party, and I was in a party with human people. I was actually getting excited. Let's kill the Shadow Lord. We tap on the door, and it's like, it's not working. What's going on? You guys have the mission. You guys are on the right mission, right? I'm like, I look on the menu. Yeah, I'm on the right mission. I look on the wiki. It doesn't say anything. I check the second wiki. Oh, I'm not actually allowed to be here until I talk to the president of Bestock. I'm not supposed to be, guys, I'm not supposed to be here. But it turns out one of the guys doing that quest was in the same spot. He didn't know he was supposed to talk to the guy. So we actually went back together, talked to the guy, got the stupid cutscene we were supposed to have, went back to the dungeon, back to the door, met up with the other guy who was like, you guys did it right? Did you do it right? Are we actually ready? Okay, yeah, we're ready. The door opens. Boom, it's the Shadow Lord. Da 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 da. That's his theme. Let's go, let's do it. Boom, he comes in, he spawns a couple trusts to help us on the way. We kill him in like 5 hits. One of the guys was a couple levels above what he really needed to be, but we killed him so fast because, like I said, what was overpowered in 2002 is like garbage in 2022. So we all had like normal level weapons by today's standards, which by 2002, which is when this was the final boss, was able to wipe the floor just with the basic equipment that we had. We just killed him. And then, that was the end. 65 hours in, I had beaten Final Fantasy XI. I had done it with people. I had done it within the confines of my free trial month. It was a success, but it felt incomplete. It felt like I had not really experienced this game for what it was. It felt like I had barely scratched the surface. Friends were telling me I played more than enough. I did not need to continue just for the review. In fact, I probably played more than most reviewers played when the game came out in 2002. But it just didn't feel right. I sometimes see myself as a completionist. I have a lot of platinum trophies on my belt. I spend a lot of time trying to see every game to the absolute fullest at a reasonable extent. I'm the type of guy who sits through all the credits at a movie at the theater, and not because I'm conditioned by Marvel to see and post-credits stuff, because I just like to see the full picture, regardless of whether there's something there or not. Just what I like to do. That's why I started this series. I always wanted to play some Final Fantasy game at some point. 7 is like a bucket list game at least. I didn't want to just play 7. I kind of want to play them all, if I'm going to play any of them. I know that's such a weird, huge jump, but that's just how I want to do things. Man, if I had $1 for every time somebody told me, you don't actually have to play them in order. You don't actually, the story's not connected. They're actually all different. Yeah, thanks, dude. It's not about that. And there kind of is an overarching story, at least from like a industry development point. If you're looking closely, if you've been following along this video, you probably have seen that too. And even though this is already at 65 hours, the longest time I've spent on a single entry, it felt like it wasn't enough. Not for me. I needed to go deeper. I needed to not half-ass this, I already started it. How do I finish it? That is the question. Because I can't beat every DLC. That would just take forever. I needed to find my ending. We'll discuss the DLCs and what that entailed in the next section after the following, which is a soft conclusion. These are most of the thoughts that I had about the game before my second month, my paid month, where I actually spent $13 after the free trial to get an additional month to experience more of this torture. I just had to do it. But let's get into the section I'm going to call conclusion with a question mark, because it's not really a conclusion. Let's get to it. Here's what I wrote. What is the purpose of a game? Adventure? Challenge? Tell a story, perhaps? The purpose of this game is to waste a player's time as much as possible to squeeze some subscriptions out of them. That's what I believe. Square Enix makes a monthly income from you sitting down in front of your computer and doing literally nothing. I know that's how people describe playing games in general, but I mean actually doing nothing in a game world. And you pay that income. It's the same philosophy that we all hate mobile gaming for. At least mobile games have some sort of purpose. We all kind of start those because we need something to take time away, like we're in the line at the DMV, or there's a lot of downtime at work, or I'm on my lunch break, but I ate my sandwich in 20 minutes and I still got 40 more minutes. They all start from there, and then before you know it, on your days off, you're playing the mobile game, and you don't actually like it. You're just sinking time into this app, like, oh, you guys are gonna hang out, I gotta sink time into my mobile game, I gotta do at least 2 hours a day, like, this is a call to arms for anybody stuck in a mobile game. Think about why you're playing it. Think about a goal that you have. And if that doesn't actually exist, just delete that app, man. It's doing nothing for you. Little side tangent, but I compared this game a lot to mobile games because it's so similar. It's not really a game. It's not a game. It's just something that you're supposed to stare at forever and pay forever for it. It just bothered me. Now, a game can be bad. A game can be frustrating, poorly designed, whatever. But no sin to me is worse than one that just deliberately wastes your time with nothing of value to give you in the end. The 30 hours I spent on Final Fantasy II is nothing compared to this. How naive was I a year ago when I reviewed that game, calling it a terrible experience, and up until now, I had it at the bottom of my Final Fantasy ranking list. Just totally the worst of anything I've reviewed because it's just so messy, it doesn't make any sense. I hated it when I played it. But looking back, Final Fantasy II is a detrimental piece of the Final Fantasy overarching story. Without Final Fantasy II's introduction to named characters and plot relevance and choosing dialogue, we wouldn't have Final Fantasy IV. Without its completely messed up but admittedly ambitious gameplay of individual stat raising, we wouldn't have one of my favorite games in this series, Final Fantasy V, or any game with a job system. As frustrating as that game was to play, I felt the passion of the developers. I felt the ambition. There's a piece of Final Fantasy II that exists in all of these games that I've reviewed up to this point. If you're a Final Fantasy fan, you should play 2. It's not going to be the funnest, but you should play it and you will get value out of that. But I'm playing through 11 and man, it's just boredom at most. At most, you get that usual dopamine rush of seeing a bar fill up when you level after a long grinding sesh. The same amount of dopamine you get from getting 3 stars in Candy Crush level 8762. People who say it's better without guides, it's better to experience it naturally, but that'll just take 5 times as long. According to people online, even beating all of the DLCs together would take around 500 hours. I can't think of a game I have sunk 500 hours into. I did the math using all of the stats that I've been logging since the beginning of this series. If you add up all of the hours that I spent on every individual game, all 20 of them before this, including the movies and the anime and all of that, it comes out to like 470 something. So, what would you do? Spend 500 hours in this world doing repetitive, boring quests, but experiencing the world naturally, or 10 of the most influential RPGs of all time, plus spin-offs? And Chrono Trigger, don't forget Chrono Trigger, just doesn't seem worth it at all to me. I started this series for a number of different reasons, including being a completionist and just seeing if I can do this and figure it all out, but I would be doing this without YouTube. I just should make clear. I do this kind of stuff. I like giving myself these weird, fun challenges. It's kind of like I enjoy video games, but it also has this layer of like a metagame to it where I can do them all in order and look how many people in the world have even done that for this incredibly long series. All of the games I would have stuck with, I would have played all the way through without YouTube, and 11 was the first time when I was like, I would have dropped this like a dump in the toilet if I didn't have this video to make. I would have given up so long ago. I mean, this is going to be an incredibly long video, probably my longest video ever. Doesn't matter if it gets views. This is my time capsule. This whole series is my time capsule for this video diary of me experiencing the evolution of an industry, basically. That's what I love about this. And that's what this piece will exist for. This game asks so much of you. Only the people truly willing to give a piece of themselves to the game, a large portion of their life for a large portion of time, will get anything remotely good out of it. And you, again, could say that for every MMO. That's one of the key factors, is that at the end of this, no matter how long this video is, I don't know if I'll consider this a complete review until I beat Final Fantasy XIV. Because everything I'm saying might be applied to 14. Maybe I'm just really not a fan of MMOs. Maybe it's not so much that this is 20 years old. I mean, it has to be to some extent. Like, I know this game is really old and frustrating for a lot of people who are fans of 14. So I'm kind of banking on that. But what if I play 14 and it's like a similar deal of like, wow, everything takes so long. I'm not being attached to the characters, this, that, and the other thing. What if that's how it goes? And then by the conclusion, I'll be like, well, I guess I am never going to play an MMO again because that's how I feel about them. Because literally every other game that I've played in this series has gotten a port, a remake, a remaster that adds literally cheats. You can click a button and your game is going in 3 times speed, sometimes more. You can have a cheat that lets you kill everything in one hit. And it's like, yeah, if you just turn that on for the entire experience, of course, it's not going to be great. I know people who would do that. Like, well, yeah, I mean, I'm going to kill everything in one hit. Why wouldn't I turn it on? And then they beat the game and they're like, that wasn't that fun, man. I don't know what everyone's talking about. It's like, bro, you didn't even play it. You watched it be played, kind of like what the actual experience of 11 is. But my point being, those are added to improve the inherent issue with RPGs that everything takes too long. Final Fantasy VII on the PS1, it's old, man, at this point, and people who play it expecting that legendary reputation might get turned off by how slow everything takes if it wasn't for that 3 times speed. Or the kill everything in one hit ability, it's not used just to wipe out a boss that you didn't even get a second chance to do, you just got lazy. No, it's for those long periods of time when you're walking through an area that you don't want to fight enemies in because they're too weak or something and they're not worth it. So you just kill in one hit. Or there's the no encounters button, like all of these little things to make the game more modern and easy, accessibility. You can't do any of that in an MMO because it's online and everybody needs to be on that same level playing field, which means your attention span needs to be astronomical to put up with this game. Finally, we'll wrap up this conclusion point with my main 3 ideas that I have brought up in this video. There's 3 takeaways. Number 1, Final Fantasy XI is a game whose main objective is to waste your time as much as possible, by any means necessary, only adding quality of life when it is the bare minimum required to let new players in. Number 2, Final Fantasy XI is a completely different game than it was 20 years ago, or even 15 years ago, or 10 years ago. The nature of an ever-evolving MMO, an ever-evolving world, that's just how it goes. And the game that new players are experiencing is not the one that you are nostalgic for your gaming buddies that you had in high school, 2006, when you were playing through it for the first time. And number 3, Final Fantasy XI is not a game. I've gone over all of these points. I'm standing by them. These are all the things that make it not worth it to you. Anybody watching this, I doubt you care enough. You probably weren't thinking about playing it, but just don't play it. Get 14. I'm sure 14's fine. I'm going to hold my breath on that, though. That's the future. We'll get to 14. And no matter how big Final Fantasy gets, or how big 14 gets, and how forgetful 11 has been over time, as an outsider, I didn't even know 11 was an MMO. I just knew it existed because I knew there was a 15, and by that logic, there needs to be a 1 through 14. 11 was a game, that's all I knew. No matter how lost in time it gets, the game will forever live on because of those hardcore players who still stick around. Those are people who probably don't like 14 because it goes against the philosophy of 11. And as long as there's enough of those guys, 11 will exist. And if they ever go away, who knows what the fate of 11 will hold. Maybe they'll just actually make it an offline game that's more playable and more interesting. Maybe they'll... No, they're not gonna. I don't think there's much going on for 11. I'm pretty sure there's like 2 developers on it still, just maintaining it. Kind of like Team Fortress 2, there's just like a couple guys. Added in a new crate, yeah, because people will buy it. We don't actually need to add content anymore. It's like in that zone. At least it's not overrun by aimbots, I'll give you that. So that's the conclusion? With a question mark? Let's skip ahead in time. Month 2, the DLC month. Beyond the mainline story. What is it like? Does it improve? Because according to everybody, it does. You ask anybody online, there's some people who think Final Fantasy XI has the greatest story in the series, which is a huge thing to say. But you'll tell them about the main line being boring, and they'll be like, oh yeah, well the main line's not even... Calling the main line story an appetizer for the real story is an understatement. It's nothing. Now this game was incredibly popular and had a lot more players for a lot longer than you might think. Let's take a look at the release of the DLCs. August 2003, Rise of Xylart. I know I said the DLCs don't continue from each other and they're all scattered in their own thing, but the Rise of Xylart is kind of a continuation. I played a little bit of all these DLCs. The beginning of the Rise of Xylart, which was only a year after the base game. The story starts with Lion, that girl with the mane and the tail, coming up to you in a random town and saying, so are we gonna go over there like we said we would? And you're like, huh? Your character's like, huh? And she goes like, yeah, we're gonna go find those guys. And you're like, what guys? What are you talking about? We killed the Shadow Lord and everything's done. And she goes like, you mean you don't remember? And the entire story of the Rise of Xylart is based off of a retcon of the ending. It flashes back to the ending cutscene where the Shadow Lord just dies and nothing else interesting happens. And it goes like, no, actually, this whole group of guys were there. And they said, we're gonna resurrect the Shadow Lord again, and we're gonna cause all the chaos and bring evil to the land. And you were there and you said, okay, I guess I'm gonna stop you. And then they disappeared. You don't remember that? September 2004, The Chains of Promethea. This is about, I know a kid gets sick and he turns, I think he's on a quest to become like some sort of spirit demon, and there's political and social problems within the town regarding that, and people want to capture him, and he trusts in you to kind of save him from becoming a god or something. I only got the small bits of the story, but that at least seemed like much more of an interesting story than what we had, but not enough for me to really care and continue. April 2006, The Treasures of At Urgan. This added a whole big new area you sail to, and it's got different architecture and different lands, different maps, it was a breath of fresh air compared to the normal Vana'diel world that you've been looking for. It definitely feels like, oh, this is DLC. This is like a little different. I like that. The story is that you're a mercenary for this sassy cat girl who bosses you around and tells you to do things. Kind of feels like what the base game was. And then you go to this ancient ruins and they're like, we gotta find stuff here, and that's about as far as I got. It was very not interesting. I'm sure it picks up. I'm sure that was only a taste, but November 2007, The Wings of the Goddess. Now this was a huge one. This is dealing with like tracking down the goddess of the land. I think there's one main goddess, Atlanta, not Atlanta, Altana, I think that is it. It's about kind of finding her, but really, it's about going back in time. Now, like I said, there's a lot of history to this world, so you go back in time and you run through all of the maps again in the past, and they're not very different. There's different enemies, but the maps are pretty much the same. The big problem I had with this one is it makes you do like your nation quests over again. So if you worked for Bastok and did the story through Bastok, you're doing that again, but in the past. And the town's a little different, but the missions are mostly the same. Just go to a place, find the guy, go to a place, kill a guy, go to the place, find 3 mold crumbs. The worst part is you spent all that time before in the main story getting all the teleport points and being able to now quick travel anywhere. But because you're in the past, every map of the past world counts as a new map, and you haven't been there yet, which means you can't teleport anywhere. It's a fresh new start, and you have to walk and walk and walk again for hours to get around again. No more convenience for you. This is a DLC. It's totally different. So that really turned me off from continuing. I sunk a lot of time into that. There's Kate Sith Kate Sith is a name they throw in there. It's not like Sid, but every now and then you get a Kate Sith. September 2010. Final Fantasy XIV. Just placing that here to give you a bit of an understanding of how big this 11 game was. That came out and it was like a new Final Fantasy MMO? Guys, are we dead? Is this the end of 11? And that was 12 years ago, so clearly no. Apparently 14 came out and it was like an absolute garbage dumpster fire till they remade it, so I guess that bought them a few years of not worrying about 11 dying. March 2013, the Seekers of Adolin. This presented another new area with new culture and new towns and new enemies and everything. New skills you can learn for these areas for traversing them, like breaking down giant rocks and climbing things. Kind of interesting in the story. It's another pretty political story that I didn't get that far into, but there was like a little civil war secretly going on underground in this very uptight town with a castle and a princess and everything, so I was kind of into it. I could have saw that through, I think. Not bad. DLC is definitely much more entertaining than the base game story, but still, I mean, all the complaints I complained about remain for all the DLC. In May of 2015, the Rhapsodies of Vana'diel. The Rhapsodies of Vana'diel was the final major story update in 2015. The goal of this was to tie together all of the stories retroactively, featuring new characters and creating one final finale of Final Fantasy XI. That's what I had my eyes set on. I mentioned the Rhapsodies of Vana'diel a little bit earlier. It's a DLC you need to tackle as soon as humanly possible because of the key items that you get that permanently boost your character. But this idea of a true finale really intrigued me because like I could have played through Chains of Promethea or Wings of the Goddess all the way through to the end. But that just would have been another story that just kind of stops and doesn't feel like a finale because so much more came before it and after it. But the Rhapsodies of Vana'diel was apparently an ending. And I thought to myself, if it's possible to beat the Rhapsodies of Vana'diel, that could be my ending. And this DLC, of course, requires you to go through a certain amount of each DLC to ensure that the story kind of makes sense. I mean, retroactively tying like 10 years worth of content together, it's not an easy task, and the story already wasn't that thrilling, so yeah, it doesn't pull that off super well, and it's mostly focused on a new character. I think she's new. I don't know if she appears in the other DLCs that I didn't get around to, but her name is Iroha, and she's actually pretty cool, the character I connected with most, definitely, throughout my experience. So that was my new goal for this next month. I don't know if it was possible. My idea was I'm paying for this month, I'm playing throughout the month. If it expires, I'll be done, and maybe I'll fail. But we're gonna try it. We're gonna try beating Rhapsodies, and I'll tell you all about it. The first mission on the docket, of course, is grinding. I beat the game at level 50, which was the original level cap. Rhapsodies of Vana'diel being the final DLC, something I didn't think about when I set this goal was that being the last major DLC probably means you're going to need to be at the level cap, 99. Uh-oh. I started grinding, not sure if I'd actually make it that far, but I just, why not, right? I have this month, I'm already doing it. I took to Reddit, r/FFXI. Any tips on grinding, any tips on what I should do to get it done faster? And this game is an absolute tedium, an absolute misery. Is there any way to make it better? I got a lot of annoying comments like, every RPG has grinding, so clearly you're not a fan of RPGs. Like, almost said a bad word. Not gonna say it. I really despise that argument when people say every RPG has grinding, because that's not true at all. I used to say, well, modern RPGs don't have grinding, but the old ones didn't. But that was before I played through all of the previous Final Fantasy games. I didn't grind except for maybe the original trilogy on NES, maybe a little bit just to get a couple level boosts or to get some certain equipment. But 4 through 9, no grinding, and I didn't have to cheat for boss battles either. So that's not true, my friend, at least not as far as Final Fantasy goes, and this is Final Fantasy. You don't have to grind for most RPGs, I'd say. You certainly don't have to grind to the extent that this game asks of you. I mean, every Final Fantasy game has a level cap. Usually it's level 99 or something, and you don't dream of getting to that unless you're some hardcore fan of the game who wants to do absolutely everything. Maybe it's a good idea to be 99 if you're doing all of the super bosses and extra content, which I didn't do. But to demand level 99 for main story, that's rough, dude. And also, level 99 is different in this game compared to normal games. Because the original idea of maximum cap was 50, and now you're doubling that. It's gone so far, every level requires more of you than the last, of course, to grind it, so the grind is pretty miserable. I did actually get some decent tips from these Reddit comments about getting EXP rings, charging them up, and whenever I was decently leveled enough, and I did enough of my stupid limit break quests, I continued with the Rhapsodies of Vana'diel. Somewhere along the way, I found out that level 99 isn't really the cap. This is when it gets really deep into FF11. The actual cap is 99, but there's some challenges that go beyond that. There are monsters that are level 120 or higher. So instead of just continually increasing the cap, there is now item level, which you're not going to experience unless you get this deep, as deep as I got. Some items that you can achieve at level 99 have an item level that goes up to 119. I keep saying 120. They go up to 119 for some reason. They don't actually cross to 20. So once you reach the level cap of 99, you're not done. If you want to be as strong as you can be, you need to get eye level 120. Your trusts after 99 gain the power of your average amount of armor levels. So if you have an armor level 119 helmet, but the rest of your armor is basic armor, they're going to be weak. So you need to get a full set of level I-119. I was looking at all this stuff as I was grinding and realizing I may have made a mistake. Let's continue. Let's actually fast forward. I hit a boss called the Siren in Rhapsodies of Vana'diel. It's one of the hardest bosses in the entire game, even though it's a third of the way through the story of Rhapsodies. She's just incredibly hard. She's a huge damage sponge, and your trusts are weak against her. It's just a bad fight. They say you gotta be level 80 something to solo it, so that was my first grinding milestone. I started to get into the grind. Of course, I watched a lot of movies and shows on the side, that helped a lot. You ever watch a bad thing on the side of a really boring game? And it kind of, when you compare them relatively, the thing that's bad, the movie, is probably more entertaining than grinding for hours on end, so you kind of find enjoyment in it. I watched The Simpsons season 29 and thought, that wasn't a bad season. I did have some fun times hanging out with friends on Discord and whatnot while I was grinding it. Anything you can to make the tedium a little bit more fun, that helped a lot. Shouts out. So fast forward through all that, and we eventually hit the final week, a little bit more than a week, but around the final week, when I was level 83 or whatever, and I was I'm in a place to beat the Siren, but that's again a third of the way of the story. How much more do I need to go? I'm not sure I can do this, man. I started to get really doubtful, even though deep down I didn't think I really would ever do this, but now I'm just now that the finish line was in sight, I was it's gonna be really disappointing if I don't get somewhere after another additional month. I amped up my playing of FF11. I decided to go all in. I said to myself, I'm going hardcore, shut in. I'm playing this game. Minimum real life responsibilities, work and whatnot, and meeting people I need to meet every other point, and playing this game, sinking hours into the grind, like many hardcore fans do already. This is the true experience of the game I've been looking for, and it might suck, and it might not even work. It might not get me to where I need to be, but I'm going for it. You can do the math. The first month I did was 65 hours. The second month I did got up to 169 hours, so it's kind of a huge difference in the amount of time I sunk into this game, and most of it was in that last week, just saying screw it, screw life for a week. I'm just doing this. Wouldn't advise a decision as that, but that's what I did because I really wanted to see if I could do it. I wouldn't say I was the biggest fan of myself being an MMO junkie for a week. Not a great feeling. I already had this immense feeling of loneliness playing this game in general. Now dedicating so much more time to it just made me more and more depressed. But this was now a battle. This was a battle between me and the game and my mind to think if I can endure this much more to face the ending. Could I do it? Could I really cross the finish line and feel like I beat Final Fantasy XI? And then I hit the merit point quests. They introduced this new system called merit points. When you reach a level cap, you ask for a new limit break quest, and okay, your limit break quest is to gain merit points. It's a new system, and you can trade those merit points in to boost stats permanently. It's a kind of a good idea, cool system for somebody who's like maxed out. Not somebody who isn't maxed out. It's actually annoying for them because you now switch manually between earning XP and earning merit points. You earn 10,000 limit points and you exchange that for 1 merit point. And these limit break quests require you to spend a certain amount of merit points, not on your stats. That would be useful. Instead, you just throw them away to the guy. You give them to the guy and he says, okay, now your level cap is increased. So what I'm telling you is, you stop leveling, but you have to keep grinding to earn basically fake levels, to earn the privilege to be able to level up again. 10,000 limit points equals 1 merit point. 10 merit points equals you can now start leveling again. You can't get XP from it. You just are allowed to start earning again. I was gonna break my screen in half. So the grind I already knew was going to be relentless. Just added in Lord knows how many more merit points I needed to earn while not actually leveling. Fake levels. I had to get fake levels. That's just brutal. That's just crazy that they did that. And you get a new merit point quest every 5 levels until you reach 99. I reached level 99 in my final week. And of course, people online told me, yeah, welcome to the beginning, pal. Screw you. You know how much pain and suffering it took to get level 99? I never got to level 99 like any game. And here I am doing it in a game that I freaking despise. I progressed significantly in the Rhapsodies of Vana'diel quests. There are milestones where it's like, okay, to continue Rhapsodies, you need to actually progress a certain amount in this DLC. So that's how I experienced all the DLCs. I got like the beginning sort of portions of all of them, got a taste, but then I continued to the meat, which was Rhapsodies for me. I just wanted to see Rhapsodies. I got to know Iroha. She's cool. I like her. She is a person from the future who is apparently like my Padawan, like my person who trains under me. And she meets up with me and you're like, Master, what's up? What's going on? And you're like, me? And you get to know each other. She tells you about all the stories that you tell her, and the future is in shambles. The future, darkness wins, that kind of thing. And you need to listen to me and stop it. And she has this thing where she keeps dying, but dying sends her back through like the life stream. Yeah, the life stream. Remember the life stream? That was a kind of a cool thing in the story. Like, I learned more about the life stream in this game than I did in 7. 7, it was like really weird and confusing, but this game I learned kind of what the life stream was, and I think the lore was consistent with 7, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed part of the story. I enjoyed Iroha as a character. Fast forward a little bit more. We're getting to the end, for real. So I was currently doing the Seekers of Audlin questline. That was the last DLC I needed to progress a certain way into before Rhapsodies was completely open to me. It was Friday, and my subscription was expiring Tuesday. So basically I needed to blow through this first part of the DLC and then blow through the rest of Rhapsodies. I was dedicating a lot of time, but man, that was cutting it close. And I get up to the part where you go into town and you join a coalition and you got to do missions for the coalition. there's this currency that you spend to take in assignments. I don't know why you need to spend currency to do that, but you gotta. Okay, you'll start with 3 of them. Here you go. You start with 3 of them. You spend all 3, and looking through the wiki, because the quest line literally tells you nothing. It just says like, do stuff in town. It's like, that doesn't sound like mainline story to me. But on the wiki tells me the next mainline mission will not open up until you spend 15 of these currency things that you get. You start with 3, you spend them immediately. Here's the thing. How do you earn this currency, you may ask? You need to wait. Every 6 hours you wait, you earn 1. 1. I did the math. I spent 3, so 12 remained. 12 times 6, 72. That's 72 hours. 3 days. I had to wait. I had to do nothing. Literally sit there and wait. There was nothing else I could do. Monday morning, have to go to work, so come back after work. And that is the last amount of time I have. Monday night, because I expire on Tuesday. Just because I have to wait for a currency to appear in my pocket randomly, so I can spend them on an irrelevant thing that'll, for some reason, continue the story. I was so defeated. I had been half a week through my hardcore week that I started, and this was how I would die. Just waiting, just having forced to wait for 3 straight days. I was so upset, I was so defeated, and then I checked the second wiki. You remember what I said? They don't always share the same information. Some have better information than others. The second wiki told me, you can lessen this number. You don't have to spend 15 if you're famous in the town, if your fame level's high enough. To get your fame level high enough, you need to do random quests throughout the town. The more quests you do, side quests, your fame level goes up. The higher your fame level is, the less points you need to spend in order for this quest to appear. Basically, the idea is they didn't want you to continue with the story until you just messed around in the town enough, either waiting to get the points or by doing quests to have to spend less points. It's all so convoluted. And then I had to go through the quests, see how many quests were reasonably doable, and some of them were bad. If this didn't work, I failed, because I couldn't wait that long and then only have a night to beat it. It wouldn't be enough. And I discovered this 3-quest chain where it's basically just give this person an item, give this person an item, and give this person an item. Once you do the third one, you can repeat starting with the first one. So the idea is I went to the auction house, which is the player-based auction house. Every player sells things, and if you bid high enough, you can get the thing. I needed to repeat this line of 3 quests a number of times. According to the wikis, that was going to be about 24 times. 3 quests, 24 times each. I needed to buy 2 full stacks of these items at the auction house, which they were being sold for quite a lot of money because people know about this exploit and they know that they can get money off of noobs who are trying to do this fast. At this point, I was really running low on money, but I spent all I could, man. I spent every last dime that I possibly could on getting these crappy items to do the crappy quests so I can spend less currency. That was about 3 hours that night of that Friday night, doing those quests on repeat 24 times, 36 times, I think, eventually. I maxed out my fame level, which I wasn't even trying to do, but eventually I did. Doing the same thing over and over and over. I mean, it didn't feel that different from the normal experience of the game, but grinding out those quests was another level of tedium. Had to watch a couple movies during that time. I watched The Men Who Stare at Goats. You ever watch that movie? Kind of sucked. And I went to bed just thinking, well, all I can do now is wait. I needed to wait a little bit to get a couple more of those currencies. Even max fame was not enough. So I just went to bed feeling like, oh my gosh, this is it. I have to wake up, come back. 6 hours will have passed and we'll have another currency. Spend that and hope that unlocks the quest. I spend whatever currency I have left. Go to the guy who's supposed to give me the quest, but he only does it when the game decides you are ready. And he doesn't give me the quest. I have no choice. This is literally my last chance. My subscription expires on Tuesday, but my friend, Sunday was Mother's Day. I was going to dinner with my grandma. I was not about to ditch my grandma for Final Fantasy XI. This was do or die. So as I wait another 6 hours, I guess, to get another one of those currencies, I just go out and do more quests. I unlock more stuff. I look at the wiki. I look ahead to all the next quests that I'll have to do. And I pick out these little, ooh, you're going to need this random item, huh? Well, I guess I'll hunt that item down now. I'm just going to fully stock. I'm going to meal prep my quest line coming up if I can actually break this wall that I'm on. Go out, I do all these quests, come back to the guy. He gives me the next quest. I'd worked like 12 hours. Not 12 hours of waiting, 12 hours of grinding quests to get to this point. To skip ahead to this stupid story cutscene just so I can continue the Seekers of Adoulin story. Just so I can continue the Rhapsody story. So I do it, I go through, it's actually kind of cool. I really like the map design, the best of Seekers of Adoulin. I think they outdid themselves with that when it came to map design. I just think it all looks really cool, and I like that town. Giving the game a couple compliments, okay? But God, this was torture. And I know that this I have no excuse. Like this, the game is not meant to be experienced this way. And boy, the rest of that Saturday was just cruising, just blasting through this game at the highest speed I have ever gone through. At that point, I was a master of efficiency. Like I said, this game turns you into a machine. I was the machine. I saw the code at that point. I grinded my way. I even bought level I-119 armor. The stats of the armor that you can buy are actual trash, according to players. But all that mattered was that they were level 119, so my trust's average level would also equal 119, and I'd be as powerful as I literally could have been because there was no more room for grinding. This was all quest story content moving forward. We're doing it! After blazing through the Seekers of Adoulin story, I had just the Rhapsodies of Vana'diel left to tackle. Couple of bosses, couple of cutscenes, a few quests too. Some a little annoying, but I managed to get through to the final boss. Reading up on the wiki as always, I saw a few concerning points, bullet points, sat there on the wiki page, such as the one that said, this boss cannot be soloed unless you are a very high damage DPS class with a sub job that also counts as a tank with DPS as well, like a warrior and a ninja or something like that. And I was a wee little mage with no sub job. And I gave it a good college try or two, and after all that, after all I went through, I could not beat the final boss. I had to do what the game has always wanted me to do. Just ask for help. Remember that link shell I signed up for way at the beginning? I've decided to finally make use of those guys. I want to give a shout out to the Knights of Blood Oath, Bahamut Final Fantasy XI link shell. They're a bunch of great guys who, they were just super nice, and I never talked to them unless I needed something, so I felt like I was kind of a jerk in that situation. But they've all just been nothing but helpful, including the guy who decided to help me when I randomly went into the chat at 8:30 p.m. on a Saturday in May. Can somebody help me with the Rhapsodies of Vana'diel final boss? And he said, yeah, give me a bit. His name was Aleingarn, and as soon as he joined my party, he made a comment something along the lines of, you're playing on expert mode without a sub job. And I was like, I didn't think I needed one till now. And I didn't need one, and I don't regret my decision, by the way. When we entered the battlefield, he said, leave the trust to me. And he spawned a couple of trusts of his own, probably hand-picked to be a lot better for the fight, due to his way better understanding of the game and the gameplay. I sat there and twiddled my thumbs watching him do his thing, and he said, are you gonna do your buffs? And I was like, yeah, like, right, red mage, I'm the buff guy. And I looked through my magic cast list and tried to find some buffs, pretended like I knew that was my job as a red mage. Protect 2, yeah. Shell 4, gotta have shell, resistant to magic, right? These are spells I used almost never throughout my game because, didn't need them. I casted protect and shell on him as well and thought, alright, I guess I'm doing my job and we're ready to go. We run into the battle. I try to fight, I die. He tries to fight, he gets pretty far. He dies. The special condition with this fight is that Iroha is actually with you as an NPC, and she revives you when you die. This is like a fight unlike most fights in the game where dying is part of it. You're supposed to be able to die and come back and rebuff yourself before the guy kills you again. It's a very tough challenge if you don't know what you're doing. Because I died before him, Iroha chose to revive me and never revived him for some reason. I tried to run away. I went on the sidelines as the final boss chose to keep attacking Iroha by herself, who was, not getting any help from me. And I just sat there wondering when Iroha was going to do her thing and revive my friend who was actually going to defeat the boss, and she just didn't do it. That's when Aleingarn chose to tell me, hey, can you raise me? Can you cast the spell of raise on my dead body to raise me? For those who don't know the terms. And I said, I feel like the biggest dumbass in the world. I don't even realize that I can also raise people. And I look through my magic list and I actually can't. I don't have raise. One of the most basic, useful, important, integral magic spells in any Final Fantasy game. Raise, allowing the support class, aka me, to raise the damaging classes from the dead. I didn't have it because I didn't need it for the entirety of the game, and it never even occurred to me to get it. Trusts, when they die, they disappear, and you're supposed to just respawn them, which you can't do mid-battle. So, when you lose a trust in a battle, you lose a trust. Raise doesn't come into the equation ever, not one time. Did I need raise? But here, this guy is looking at me like, what kind of red mage doesn't know this spell? So embarrassing, but it completely proves my point. Final Fantasy XI is a different game now, because you don't need to know anything. This game requires nothing of you but a huge amount of patience. We failed the fight, and he said, all right, let's get another guy in here, put another call into the chat, and he got his friend, the famous in the Link Shell, the big warrior guy. His name was Elmore Gaming, and he had a lot of experience with this game. He was a monster, this guy. We approached the wall together. We all came in. They spawned the trusts. I was about to buff my friends again, realizing that now this is my support job, when Alengard just ended up using Shell 5 and Protect 5 on himself. He had better support spells than me, the support class. I felt like the biggest loser during this fight numerous times, and I just have to dish that out to make you understand how rough this ending was for me. I just watched these two do everything. It was like a Dark Souls fight when you just don't want to bother, and you summon the guy and he does the work, and you're just like, I beat the boss. But you didn't beat the boss. Elmore Gaming, with his warrior ninja combo, I believe it was, did megaton damage to this boss, while Alengard kind of was the support, and I was, I guess, emotional support. He made mincemeat of this guy. I don't even, like, the amount of damage we were doing in 10 minutes was maybe a tenth what he did in seconds. But he did the job, you know? And the final boss fell to his knees. About time. This final boss, story-wise, was the incarnation of the darkness within my own heart. Iroha came to me to stop me from becoming darkness and being a part of the basically end of the world of the future. It's a pretty cool time travel story from a perspective of the person who's not time traveling. But we defeat the darkness. We defeat the darkness. And then we come back to the grassy fields that we were in moments ago. My friends leave the party because they know I'm about to watch some cutscenes, and they said, have fun, make sure you work on that sub job, haha. I didn't have the heart to tell him I was not planning on playing any more of this game. The side characters go away, leaving just me and Iroha behind after this horrible fight. She thanks me, the player, for my 14 years of service, which is not coincidentally about as long as the game was out when this DLC came out. She goes on a pretty potent speech about what dies is never dead when their memory lives on. It was time for her to return to her time, so I could meet her naturally, and our relationship can bud as it should by the laws of science. She takes a lock of her hair, the ponytail, cuts her hair short, gives me the blessing of the phoenix. Engrossed in her hair locket, gives it to me, and goes on her way. And after that, possibly the most beautiful imagery in the game shows up. The credits. This is the only time the credits appear in the entire game, giving a feeling of an epic conclusion. The one I was hoping for 100 hours 1 month ago. For the first time in this game, I felt like I really accomplished something, even though it wasn't me who killed the final boss. I went on this journey. I defeated the grind. I leveled up to level 99. I equipped level 119 armor. I experienced all of the rhapsodies of Vana'diel in 60 days. I was viewing the credits, over which a fantastical lyrical song, keeping on the tradition of 8, 9, and 10, keeping a lyrical song in, and it's a great lyrical song, featuring a chorus of actual Final Fantasy XI players who don't sound too bad, by the way. The song was beautiful. The moment was beautiful. It was like 11:30 p.m. on a Saturday, and my parents were in bed, but I blasted that music and didn't care because this was a moment for me. I really beat this game. I didn't go on YouTube like many told me to do and watch the remaining cutscenes. I have a thing about that. I don't like doing that for any game, although I understand if you would want to, especially in a case like this, but it's just, it doesn't feel right to me. It's not a correct way of viewing the game. Plus, in this case, you do have some other random guy on YouTube with his character and his name interacting with all the characters. It's not the same. The credits thank you and your player name for your years of service. That's me. That's my name in the credits, not some guy on YouTube named Burger King X or something. Somehow, after all that suffering, I felt accomplished. Sitting in my room in the dark, watching the full credits sequence. It was emotional, genuinely. I had been on such a grand journey of pain and suffering. Far grander than any of the other games I've played on this show, and I hated almost every step of the way. It's a beautiful ending, and it's a great metaphorical message about the power of community. This game would be 100% dead in the dirt if it wasn't for the community. I mean, it's really not meant to be played the way I play it. I completely acknowledge that. You're supposed to hang out. You're supposed to find all this stuff naturally over a long period of time. The game design philosophy of the original inception of this game in 2002 was about being social. It was about going out of your comfort zone, meeting people. They integrated systems to communicate between languages, across continents. This was one of the first recorded video games with cross-play compatibility before that term was invented. Looking back and looking through all the history, it's kind of an amazing feat, this game, but the harsh reality is that none of that philosophy exists anymore. It really doesn't. People who know what they're doing, they can get to this point in the game that I did, this credit sequence, in less than 1 month. If I knew what I was doing and restarted this journey, I bet I could do that. It's all just so confusing, and the way everybody plays games now, it's wikis. You have to look up guides. No one has the patience for this. But also, more importantly, no one's around. People you can call to defeat the final boss for you or something and do a small favor here and there, but no one's gonna carry you through the entire 169-hour journey of Final Fantasy XI. The only way you can do it the way the developers intended would be to get 5 other friends and do it all at the same time for who knows how long. But even then, the quality of life improvements such as teleportation and whatnot, that's all against the original design philosophy. The game was intended to be a chore. Literally, the developers have said this. It was intended to be from really annoying to straight up impossible to play on your own. But in today's time, I did that. I beat the entire game on my own, except for the final boss. It's a game that goes against its own ways. For the better, really. I mean, otherwise I wouldn't be able to play this at all, but the experience was terrible. So I'm not going to put myself through the grind of guesswork to figure out what to do next when nobody's around to help me anyway, especially when I'm a Google search away from getting the direct answer. But at the same time, it never feels that great to use a guide. You're never fully immersed in the world of the game as you should be, especially when you follow a guide 100% of your playthrough, which most people do with this game. At that point, are you even playing a game, or are you just reading a very long instruction manual on how to assemble a credit sequence? Earlier, I talked about Final Fantasy II and its passion, even though it was a messy game. Final Fantasy XI had that passion too. It was an incredibly innovative feat of a gaming experience when it first came out, but the core philosophy was eventually thrown away when the developers had no other choice but to throw it away. But regardless, it still felt like a very personal journey of my own playing through this game, and maybe you'll feel the same way if you ever play it. I still would not recommend it. But Final Fantasy XI, we played together, we worked together, we bled together, and I respect you. But I don't like you. And I think that's the end. That's the end of the review. What do I even say to wrap it up? You know, a lot of people didn't think I was serious about this series for the longest time. When I originally uploaded Final Fantasy 1, people thought, oh, that's funny. Final Fantasy. You guys are going to play, what, are you going to play all the games? Yeah, right. And then I upload Final Fantasy 2, and they're like, oh, wait, are you serious? You're really going to do, like, the mainline 15 games? Whoa, okay. And then I uploaded the Game Boy games, and they're like, well, you're not doing spin-offs. You're not doing like the tactics games. And then I upload the tactics games. All up until, okay, but you're not doing the MMOs. I don't know what else I need to do to tell you. I'm on this journey. This is real. I'm playing all the Final Fantasy games. The ones that are playable. The ones that aren't dead and actually unplayable. And at this point in the journey, though there's 20 years left of games to play, I feel as though I've just climbed the Mount Everest of Final Fantasy. You think I'm stopping? You think I'm stopping anytime soon? It's not happening, buddy. We're moving on to 2003. We're going to play all the games. We're going to play 14. And I don't know how long that's going to take. It might be longer than 11. We're going to play all the crap. We're going to play the mobile games. You think I'm crazy? You think I'm crazy? I'm not crazy. You're crazy. I just beat Final Fantasy XI by myself in 2 months. The last week of which I bled and sweated and stared at Final Fantasy XI for the entirety of the time. I didn't do anything else. I was a complete sloth for that final week. You understand? And you're with me on this journey, pal. No matter what happens. And this is just going to keep on going and going and going until I reviewed every last one of them. Or I pass away. Because that's the name of the show. So I'll see you on the next one. I'm going to go touch some grass.